As you probably know, Lucasfilm Games is now officially a thing. They established themselves as the brand new umbrella brand under which all games associated with Lucasfilm IP will now be released, of course most notably being Star Wars, and surprisingly, of course, Indiana Jones as well. When I saw this news about the rebrand and they released a short little trailer sizzle reel talking about Lucasfilm Games and the different games that are currently under that umbrella that have been released before, like Squadrons and Fallen Order, Battlefront, so on and so forth, it was kind of odd to me. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. They've decided to rebrand their games division. And then the next day, they announced Indiana Jones. That was surprising. And then the next day, they announced the Ubisoft game, which is all really, really exciting stuff. So it was pretty wild every day to be getting up to brand new information about Star Wars games, Indiana Jones games. And it was really smart. I think they owned the conversation in games news for that entire week as a result of that rollout plan. It was pretty good marketing in my opinion. But anyway, I'm not here to praise some PR department, okay? So Indiana Jones game was confirmed, being published by Bethesda and of course Machine Games, now falling under the Microsoft umbrella. Todd Howard is working on that game as well in the producer role. All of that was really bizarre news. I'm vaguely interested in what that game turns out to be. I think it's a fair way off. But Machine Games having, of course, as everyone continues to bring up, the experience of developing the Wolfenstein franchise, all about killing Nazis, Indiana Jones makes a lot of sense, right? But there's still continued questions about that game that need to be asked. Is it going to be first person or third person? Is it going to be Xbox exclusive or not? And only time will tell in regards to all of that. But that was some big news, and it's worth mentioning, of course, since it tied so strongly into everything else to do with the Star Wars games and what we're going to be talking about today primarily. So the meat of my excitement, of course, comes from the announcement of Ubisoft working with Lucasfilm Games to develop an open-world Star Wars game. And the implications of this are pretty substantial, and most of them are addressed in the article that Lucasfilm released themselves. They're just talking about the new direction that they're going to be taking Star Wars games in the future. Case in point, the huge news that Lucasfilm Games and Ubisoft are collaborating on a new story-driven open-world Star Wars game. It's a genre long requested by fans and will come to life via Massive Entertainment, Ubisoft's critically acclaimed studio based in Malmö, Sweden. Of course, Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment are renowned for their expertise in developing immersive worlds and in pushing the boundaries of technology with their proprietary engine Snowdrop. So naturally, when it comes to these game announcements for a title that is probably, 3-4 years away, it's pretty vague, but there's some stuff to talk about and to get out of this for sure. Ubisoft publishing a Star Wars game is tremendously exciting to me. I'm a fan of Ubisoft. I don't play all their games. Obviously, they have a reputation for creating so many games in that very, very staple, traditional Ubisoft format open world game. Large environments, big map, markers, waypoints, things to do, towers to climb, so on and so forth. We all know the drill. And I'm a big fan of that genre, to be totally honest. I really like the gameplay loop in those Ubisoft style games, and I don't love every single one of them. I'm not a big Far Cry fan personally, but hey, I mean, generally speaking, I like it a lot. And the thought of applying this to Star Wars is very, very exciting to me. We've got no idea, obviously, what time period in the Star Wars universe this game would take place in, no idea about any characters or specifics in that way. But interestingly, it's not a situation when Respawn confirmed years and years ago they were developing a Star Wars game. We had no idea what that was going to be, considering at that point that studio only had experience in the FPS space. The announcement that Ubisoft is making a Star Wars game paints a different picture. I think we can, at least to some extent, quite accurately imagine what the final product here is going to be. But Massive, of course, is primarily, we know them for being responsible for the Division franchise, both the Division 1 and 2. They do follow the traditional open world Ubisoft format we're talking about here, but they're also games as a service, they're multiplayer co-op driven experiences, primarily PvE, third-person shooters. And that's why I haven't played their games. I'm not so much into that. I'd be surprised if this ends up being a live service game, if you will, a PvE thing. It may very well have co-op, but the wording here is quite specific. It is a story-driven open-world game, and when we think about story-driven open-world games from Ubisoft, we think of Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, games that certainly have a lineage of co-op, of multiplayer, so that could still be a thing in this game. As a matter of fact, I'd bet on it, but it's not going to be quite to the extent of the Division in my opinion, which is also great. But Massive is, of course, a very capable developer. They mentioned Snowdrop as an engine. I play a little bit of Division 2 in the open beta, I think it was, and that game is gorgeous. That game is very graphically sound. People really love the combat in those games as well. So while the genre doesn't appeal to me, I mean, if we're working with the Division franchise as a groundwork for what this game can be, we're in safe hands, I think. Especially if you think about us already having Jedi Fallen Order sort of focusing on the lightsaber combat side of things in modern Star Wars games. We know, of course, massive with the Division, third-person action combat, gunplay. If you think of this being sort of gunplay focused and having a lot of different blaster variety and having third-person cover mechanics, I think that sounds really fun as well. And thank God for story-driven, you know. Star Wars games, their stories, in my opinion, have been pretty hit or miss. This past generation, I thought Battlefront 2 story was borderline garbage. I love Jedi Fallen Order's story. I think it's one of the best canon Star Wars stories out there. I haven't played Squadrons, so that, you know, there's some inconsistencies there for me personally. I can expect high production values for the story in this game, but I don't know if I can expect necessarily characters that I'm going to love. Assassin's Creed stories are sort of hit or miss for me in the same way, so I don't know, we'll see. I'm optimistic for the story. Like I've mentioned, if they nail the world exploration, if they nail the combat, the gameplay loop, all of that stuff that makes a Ubisoft open world game in our heads and what we understand that to be, then I'm going to be on board with this game regardless. I'm very excited for it. The other main takeaway from this is the fact that the EA exclusivity deal is over. It's not quite over yet, technically, I don't think, because details emerged some time ago that the deal was signed in 2013. That was the same year Battlefront 1 was confirmed, or, you know, not Battlefront 1, EA Battlefront 1, I guess, if you want to call it that. And it was a 10-year exclusivity deal for all Star Wars games to be published by EA at that time. So that means the deal wouldn't end until 2023, but maybe there's legalities there that we're not privy to. It's hard to say. People are rejoicing about this, you know, we've all been talking about for years that can Star Wars games please just get away from EA? We don't like them there, we don't like the exclusivity there. And I largely agree. I'm also very glad this exclusivity deal is over, don't get me wrong, but Lucasfilm does go into the fact that EA making Star Wars games is certainly not over, and I think that is great, so we'll get into what they have to say first. Continuing the relationship that resulted in the reinvigorated Battlefront series, the critically acclaimed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and multiplayer hit Star Wars Squadrons, Electronic Arts will too play a big role in the future of Star Wars gaming. We're really proud of the games we have created with EA, we will continue working with them, and our relationship has never been stronger. While we may not have a lot of details to share at the moment, we've got a number of projects underway with the talented teams at EA. Let's take some wild guesses as to what those projects might be. Jedi Fallen Order 2. Of course. No spoilers, but we're definitely getting a sequel to that game, there's no doubt. And I'm super excited for that. Love Jedi Fallen Order. We continue this sort of sub-franchise within Star Wars called Jedi. Have this game be called Star Wars Jedi. You know, something else, whatever the hell. Star Wars Jedi Bantha shit. You can take that one for free, Respawn. I'm glad that I'm not seeing a lot of people rolling their eyes at the fact that EA is going to continue making Star Wars games, because at the end of the day, I think we have to really focus on what we were frustrated about for the 5 or so past years we've dealt with EA Star Wars games, and it was the fact that EA are the only people making Star Wars games outside of the LEGO games. That was frustrating, knowing that we were waiting on a Battlefront 2 and, you know, some multiplayer stuff, which I really love those games, but there's no denying that the quantity and quality Star Wars games was drastically lower than we'd seen in decades prior. So this is a best of both worlds situation in my opinion. We get away from the exclusivity deal, Star Wars as an IP can now be handed out to developers that are deserving of it, that have projects they want to work on, stories they want to tell. Their creativity juices are flowing now. Anyone can make a Star Wars game potentially, which is way more exciting from a fan's perspective. And at the same time, of course, all the great stuff that EA did with Star Wars gaming, which unfortunately gets overshadowed a lot with the negative conversations, but all the great stuff they did is going to be allowed to breathe, allowed to live, and is going to continue on, which is terrific. But since 2015, there has generally been one AAA console Star Wars game every year, not counting some smaller stuff, and I know they've done some VR stuff as well, that's pretty cool. We had Battlefront 2015 in 2015, obviously. We had LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens in 2016. We had Battlefront 2 in 2017. 2018 is the only exception, I don't believe there was anything significant. In 2019 we had Jedi Fallen Order. In 2020 we had Star Wars Squadrons. The pattern is clear in 2021. Early, we know we have LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, which I'm tremendously excited for. So following this, you know, fairly consistent rule here of a major Star Wars game releasing every year, I want to try and end this by figuring out the upcoming schedule for Star Wars releases. So like I mentioned, LEGO in 2021. In 2022, for the sake of this, I'm going to assume that the EA exclusivity deal is still in play until 2023, because that's the current information that we have, so I'm going to stick with it for this. Jedi Fallen Order came out in 2019, you know, they created those characters, they created that world, they created the core combat mechanics there. I think it's fair to say, and I'm no game developer as I always say, but I think it's fair to say that development time would be cut a fair bit on this one. Jedi Fallen Order took about 4 years to develop. I think 2019 to 2022 for Jedi Fallen Order 2 for the sequel. I think that's a reasonable time period, 3-4 years of development. I think it's very possible. And that could be EA's last game under their big exclusive deal. So then what about the Ubisoft game? It's just getting announced now for the first time. Pre-production likely was already in play back in 2019, but I think it's fair to say they're still in early development over there at Massive, so I'm going to guess this is a 2024 release. Possibly 2023, I think that's pushing it. I think 2024 makes a lot of sense. Have it be, around 3.5 years from now. That sort of lines up from when Jedi Fallen Order was announced. We didn't know it as that title back then, but we knew Respawn was developing a Star Wars game in early 2016, and that came to the 2019 release, so if you follow something similar, these are all vague rules of course, but what else have I got to go on? So I'm saying 2024 for that Ubisoft Star Wars game. I'm not guessing beyond that. That leaves 2023 as sort of a blank year, and, there's a lot of potential. They could, of course, be releasing multiple Star Wars games a year at this point, but sticking with the rules for now that I've established, 2023 could see a remaster. I know everyone would shit their pants over a Knights of the Old Republic remaster or something like that. It could also be some unknown game that we're not aware of, maybe a smaller game, a Squadrons sequel. I don't know if that did well enough for that. But Squadrons was a surprise this year. We weren't necessarily expecting that long term, so there could be anything plopped into 2023 really. But that's what's so exciting about it. Literally any developer on the planet could be making a Star Wars game for that time period now, to be released in 2023 now. That's awesome. I don't think there's going to be another huge AAA release other than those two that we've already talked about, Jedi Fallen Order and the Ubisoft game, so you know what, screw it. I'm just going to try and will it into existence for the people that want it so badly. Knights of the Old Republic is getting remastered in 2023. I'm saying it right now, people. Get hyped. It's happening. I'll make that my official prediction because why not? But at the same time, now that I'm thinking about it, I also would sort of love something smaller and fun, like the classic Star Wars racing games like Episode 1 Racer. Even a platformer or, something interesting that we wouldn't expect. Maybe give the franchise to an indie developer or a AA developer or something to that effect. I don't know, I think that could be really fun as well. Anyways, we dove into the specifics of everything. I made some predictions as I love to do. The moral of this video, the moral of the story with all these announcements is that the future of Star Wars games is very bright. The possibilities are endless. As a big Star Wars fan, it's been disheartening the last 5 years or so, 6 years, 7 years, to always know that every single Star Wars game has to come from EA. There's no element of surprise there whatsoever. Now, when we're watching, E3 if it ever comes back, when we're watching other developers and their press videos and their conferences and their announcements, and we're predicting games in the future, Star Wars is now officially an IP once again that can be developed by anyone. I'm super excited to hear more about all these upcoming games, and of course to play them myself many years in the future. Anyways, are you as optimistic about Star Wars games as I am right now? Are you excited for an open world Star Wars game? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for tuning in as always. I'll see you all next time. Please do take care, and farewell.